So, welcome to the last of the live-ish masterclasses. We have kind of reached the end of season 1 of the masterclasses to a certain extent. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of do is for part 1 is kind of come back again full circle to the kind of beginning of where we were when we started, where we kind of discussed the need for sort of looking objectively at your path and your trajectory through information security, and kind of making a bit of a plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, for part 1, round back in on that aspect a little bit, for a couple of very good reasons, which I'll go into shortly. The second part is a Q&A session. Now, I've had a number of questions that have been posed, predominantly via LinkedIn, and I will be answering some of those for part 2. For part 1, we're talking about assurance and ongoing reviews. So one of the things that I've said a number of times when we began this is that you're kind of diving into an area of business, and information security is now an area of business. Sometimes it's called cybersecurity if you're more IT focused, but in essence, it's all kind of the same thing. And it moves very, very quickly. You know, some aspects of it rarely change, like the risk management side of it, some of the governance pieces. The idea of defense in depth doesn't change, but the application of defense in depth changes, as a good example. But what is really important to do at various different stages of your career is seriously kind of look back at what your original plan was and go, right, okay, is it still viable? Has anything changed? Are we in a situation where, you know, we've had a sudden rapid change in the way that we consume our technology, that my original career plan that I took needs to be kind of reviewed? Now, some of you will be going into become eventually a CISO, for instance. You know, a lot of what a CISO does at the basic level doesn't really change. You know, monitor the governance, monitor the way that you apply your defense in depth to your organization. There's a million different ways to apply that whole governance piece and that management piece. And a large chunk of that is management of people and communications. Whereas if you're a penetration tester, as a good example, you are going to be updating your skill set really, really regularly, because technological change happens at a scale that is rather significant in the way that it occurs. 1 minute, you could be sitting there coasting away, finding out that nothing really has changed with the technical vulnerability landscape. And then all of a sudden, boom, 1 zero-day vulnerability or a couple of zero-day vulnerabilities all happening at the same time will mean that all of a sudden you have a whole plethora of new techniques that you need to learn, you know, aspects of information security that you need to concentrate on. And it can be the same if you're in cybersecurity as well. You know, in cybersecurity, there are shifts and changes in technological direction. So, for instance, and it's funnily enough one of the questions I'm going to be answering later, but I'm going to kind of preempt a little bit here. One of the most significant changes that we experienced in the last 20 odd years, for me as an information security professional, was the change from kind of like the on-premise technology to the more off-premise technology, you know, where cloud suddenly became a really big thing. Virtualization was quite a key change as well. And it meant a lot of security people had to change their mindsets and the way that they apply and review their information security, because for 1 minute they were concerned about somebody getting into the computer room or the data center that was housing all of this, and then all of a sudden they were concerned with the fact that this was all housed at a third party, you know, in their digital cloud. So you were suddenly concerned more about the third party's sort of digital security than you were previously. So as that happens, you need to kind of be a little bit agile when it comes to your career and try and spot where the trends are, as a good example. If you're looking to get into information security nowadays, there are a couple of areas in technological change that I would really, really strongly recommend that you try to get into early, try to look into, consider the kind of information security aspects of, and that's very much artificial intelligence. Now, you might be experiencing a bit of fatigue around the subject of artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about it. Many of the marketing people out there are saying that their products, utilize the power of AI or machine learning or whatever. And sometimes they're correct, and sometimes they're just kind of marketing what's sexy at the time. But needless to say, artificial intelligence, in my opinion, is probably going to be the next big shift in technology. So if you're looking to get into this space at the moment, then I would seriously consider looking to go down that particular route. Other areas are really solid at the moment. Energy. Energy is a significantly important part of our species development and future health. No matter what your feelings are about renewables or nuclear or whatever, I have my own thoughts on that, but I won't go into that at this moment in time. That's a good solid area of business sector to get into in information security. Reasons being, it's heavily attacked at the moment, or it's an area that there are a lot of nation states, shall we say, looking to get footholds in other people's networks related to energy. And us in the Western world, being a capitalist society, it's all independently run predominantly by organizations. It's not state-led, which is, in actual fact, in my opinion, very good, because it means you get usually a better budget, believe it or not. So yeah, energy is quite a significant piece, specifically nuclear. There are a lot of organizations starting to facilitate the needs of nation states, because nation states have realized that nuclear is probably the only way that they're going to be able to grow their energy needs or facilitate their energy needs in any meaningful way going forward. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't, that's for you to decide. Critical infrastructure at the moment is particularly big. So any third parties that facilitate government, that kind of thing, that's a really, really good area to look at and get into, mainly because they're under quite significant attack pretty much all the time. Critical infrastructure, definitely a good place to get into. There's a number of other areas as well, but I would kind of possibly shy away from things like retail at the moment. Large retail companies, that kind of thing, they're not doing so well. And we're talking in 2023 at this moment in time. If you're watching it next year, the year after, it may be a very, very different thing in that time period. But it kind of just shows the necessity for you to look objectively at your plans and look objectively at where the world is going in a business sense, so you can appropriately plan for your own roadmap in your career. I've mentioned before about the 1 year, the 5 year, and the 10-year plan. The 1 year plan is a really good plan to kind of try to maintain as much as possible, because that's the one that you're predominantly going to be working towards. The 5 year will probably change quite regularly. 10 year will definitely change. 10 years is a long time in technology. It's a long time in Infosec. You go back 10 years, ransomware was around, but it was nowhere near as prolific as it is nowadays. Maybe in 10 years' time, it'll be something completely different. Who knows? But when you're kind of looking at your career, make sure that you kind of buff up on those soft skills on a regular basis. They do, if you haven't used some of them for a while, they do get a bit stale. So just go back. I mean, I read Chris Voss's book on negotiation and the art of negotiation with Never Split the Difference. I have the audio book and I have the actual book, and I buff back up on that at least once a year. And there's a number of other books that I kind of keep tabs on as well. It just means that a lot of the concepts remain particularly fresh in the mind. One thing I also do is look at my certifications. Sometimes certifications can they don't ever quite go, but they do get a bit stale, and just keep an eye on the market on what people are asking for. We've been lucky in the last 20 years because the certification side of things has been reasonably stable. For a long time, there was a lot of different certifications buzzing around the place. Come and do this certification, come and do that certification, and everybody was jumping in on that particular bandwagon. It quickly stabilized, however, and as long as you weren't kind of looking at a specific technology, things like the CISM, CISSP, CREST, check, that kind of thing, depending upon which area of InfoSec you were in, was, pretty much the way to go. ISO 27001 lead auditor. Who knows how it's going to go in the future? We've got all kinds of legislation coming out all over the place. We've got DORA in Europe, we've got the code in Bermuda, we've got NIST that are talking about various different changes that they want to make to their standard over in the States. The UK is constantly changing what they want to do. So just keep kind of track of where you think things are going and kind of try to preempt some of that. Hence why, for instance, I said look at artificial intelligence as a really good piece to get into going forward. I mainly say that because it's an emerging technology. It's going to become quite a significant change in technology. So learning how artificial intelligence works and learning how the different models and the different sets work and how GPT works, for instance, and so on and so forth, is going to be quite critical if you manage to get into that space and you start dealing with organizations that are dealing with artificial intelligence. And be brutal with your self-assessments as well and your strategic planning. If something is not working, if you're just not getting it, for instance, there are things that all of us are good at, and there are things that all of us aren't necessarily quite so good at. I've been a pen tester in my time. I am not the greatest of pen testers. And I definitely am not anymore because, my knowledge on that space was a long, long time ago. And I was trained by one of the best people in the business at the time. Nowadays, it's all very stale. I've been out of that for a long time. So I've kind of left that by the wayside. I still take some of the things that I've learned. I still understand how the anatomy of a penetration test works. I still understand what it's there to do. I understand what I'm looking at when I'm reading the results, because you'd be surprised how many people in InfoSec read the results of a pen test or a vulnerability scan or a report on PCI DSS, and they don't understand some of the concepts. And it's quite frightening sometimes. So, it's all about just keeping that skill set as fresh as possible. And try to avoid, and this is a bit of an IT thing actually, try to avoid what we call dead-end technology that's reaching end of life, technology that's going to become outmoded. There was a lot of people when I was younger who were specializing on mainframe technology. We don't really use that stuff anymore. I mean, there's a few companies out there that still do, but it's pretty much dead now. A lot of programming technologies, for instance, they're still there, but nobody really uses them anymore. A lot of people have moved on to other more modern types of like programming languages. So just be prepared to upskill in areas that you need to, and you're never going to stop learning. That's the other thing. It never ends. And feel free to refine your skill sets as well. I've met people in the past who've said to me, I know everything there is to know about risk management. And I kind of look at them and say to them, I want to say to them, I don't always do it, but nobody can know everything there is to know about risk management. Nobody can know everything there is to know about every single subject. You can specialize in an area. You can be very, very, very good at it. But being the be-all and end-all in that space, there are very few people are lucky enough to have the level of intelligence required to do that. So just be a little bit humble, as best as you can. There are areas I specialize in, cyber warfare, compliance, governance risks, that kind of thing. I'm still pretty good with my technology, although I'm rapidly becoming out of date with it. But I still understand how to apply security to it. It's just be brutal when you're looking inward on yourself to understand what you're good at, and where you're going with it. And that's it really for the kind of ongoing reviews. Is there a time scales you should do it on? I would say probably every 6 months is enough. You can do it annually if you want, but I tend to have like a bit of a review of where I'm going every 6 months or so. I kind of look at where my guys are going as well and sit down and try to have a chat with them about sort of where they're going as well. Because it's good to have a diverse set of skills. That's the other thing. If you're working in a team and you're all developing your careers together in many respects, look at who's got what skill sets in various different areas. It's great to get mentoring off them, or it's great to support them in how they're developing, because hopefully they'll supply you with that similar kind of level of support. And you've always know somebody who's better than you at something in particular, which is great. And it's a great space to be in. So let's start looking at some questions. Okay. With certifications usually requiring some form of annual CPD return and annual membership fee, do you see certifications as a way to get into a job role and the need to have and maintain it after employment is reduced and thus no further support for the hiring organization? Or is it there generally to support from the organization to allow employees to conduct certification bodies requirements for the... Okay. Let's break this down a little bit. First part of that question, certifications have been something that I've never been particularly that bothered about. They're really, really useful to show a minimum level of skill set, especially if you're looking to get a new job, that kind of thing. There are certain certifications that you really, really need to have to get past that kind of first initial recruitment stage. And I usually say to people, if you're looking to really make headway in this space, and it depends on your particular discipline as well, because if you're, again, I'll use the same example. If you're going to be a pen tester, you're going to need to train up and certificate against something else, rather than what a CISO would certificate against. But as a general rule for any InfoSec person, I would recommend a CISM or a CISSP, ISO 27001 lead auditor, and maybe kind of like one other. Some people go for like C-risk, which is a risk-based kind of certification. Well, not a risk-based certification. It's a certification about risk and the management of risk. What have you got? CISA, which is the Certified Information Security Auditor. That's an all right exam as well. I won't criticize any of them, but it's very much geared towards auditing. So if you're not going to be an auditor, I wouldn't do it. You may find it a little bit dry for yourself. But yes, at the end of the day, it is a good way of getting, at least in the first sort of 5, 6, 7 years of your career, into new roles to further your skill sets. Because you tend to see that as a minimum standard. Definitely the CISM and the CISSP. ISO you can possibly get away with not having, but you know what? It's such a simple certification to get, and I don't mean that it's uber easy. I found it easy, but I've been doing auditing for years before I did it, in a variety of different other certification bodies. So, and it was just a continuation of what I knew, just applied slightly differently. And that's the other thing. If you do learn, say, your ISO 27001 lead auditor certification, you could probably relatively easy get the CISA certification by doing the exam, doing a bit of read up, maybe buy one of the books from an online retailer, quickly read through it. You'll probably see most of it will be very similar to what you've experienced before. and then just go and do the exam. Once you get one certificate, a lot of the other certificates seem to get a little bit easier to get. But you are right, there is a maintenance fee for some of these. Now, I've always been a bit of a question. I've always questioned this a little bit. You know, there's always a yearly charge. Well, I don't know what they're charging for, because you got the exam, you paid for the exam, you've done the exam. There's a yearly charge. What's that for? What, maintaining a digital record that you've got it? I suppose. But is it appropriate? I don't know. And then the continuing education points, CPDs, CPEs, they're called all kinds of different things in different standards. I see the value of them, but they're kind of easy to falsify. And I mean that with all the love in the world. I've spoken to people who obviously haven't done security in any great length of time or in any detail, and they consistently maintain their CPEs or CPDs or whatever you want to term it as. Yeah, and I question the level of knowledge that they have. They were basically designed so for certifications that don't run out, you can kind of utilize the CPE format to kind of show that you're still progressing and you're still learning through your information security journey. Well, if you're doing the job, you're going to be learning that anyway, and you're going to be a part of that whole process. So why do you need to prove that? I don't know. And tell me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm completely wrong. It's just what I've experienced. So do organizations support you continuing on and help you with your CPDs and fee payments? Some do, some don't. Depends on the certification that you've got. In all honesty, a lot of the fee payments for the standard stuff, like trying to think now, CISMs, CISPs, I think it's been a while since I paid mine up, but it was about $100, which is not a massive amount, I suppose. But I had to kind of put in my CPDs, which was a bit of a pain. That took me an hour or so to do. I get through mine quite quickly because I do this kind of content. And if you are looking to do your CPDs, a little bit of a tip: white papers, educational content, that kind of thing. Write a book, whatever. Really good way of getting your CPEs and CPDs really, really quickly. If it's something like being a PCI DSS QSA, then yes, your organization will support you in maintaining that, but mainly because they need you to have that. If it's something like a lead auditor thing, or CISM, CISSP, some will, some won't. It depends on them. But again, to be honest, just pay your money, put in your CPDs, and then it's done for another year. What more can I say? Certifications are a bit of a funny one for me. Some of the best InfoSec people I know have never had any certifications, really. But then they were managed to get in quite early on before HR departments and recruitment agents started requiring a minimum standard of certification. So one of my questions that I got sent was, what are the most significant changes I've witnessed in the information security landscape over the last 25 years, and how have they impacted your approach to the field? That's a really good question. Most significant changes I've witnessed are definitely in a couple of areas. First and foremost, technology, which is an easy one. Technological change in the last 20 years is just a different universe. Where we were 20 years ago I find it difficult to remember how tough it was back then, in all honesty, because the change has been so great and so quick over such short periods of time between them, that it's been kind of difficult to remember what some of it looked like back in the day. The other one is very much probably the attitudes towards InfoSec. 20 to 25 years ago, there was a lot of hostility towards InfoSec people. Nobody really knew what they were there for. They didn't really appreciate they were there to support and protect the business. So you could have a few problems like that. Nowadays, very different kettle of fish. That doesn't mean you don't have to protect yourself. You still do. There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on. There's a lot of implications coming down the line as to what could happen if you don't do your job properly, to the point where, you might get ostracized from the business world if you're implicated as, not being able to handle a particularly large breach that could cause you difficulties with your career. And never do this. Like one particular CISO had experienced trying to cover something up, which is a dumb thing to do. Trying to cover something up, trying to cover, what you think is best to protect yourself or maybe your organization or somebody you work with career, only to be fined that you've lied and you've covered stuff up, and then you end up going to prison for it. You may laugh, but it has happened at least once or twice. And there is legislation coming in Europe, which is going to put substantial fines and potential jail time for people who don't secure their environments particularly well or properly. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, in 25 years, attitudes and the technology, standard application of InfoSec, like how you write policies, how you write procedures, yeah, they've changed a bit, but not in any dramatic, not as dramatically or as meaningful as the cybersecurity side of things. That's really where I see significant changes. And going forward, I think we're going to find the ability to protect organizations getting tougher. Why do I say that? Well, if you look through the YouTube channel, you go onto Spotify and you look through some of the podcasts that we've done, and I hate to harp on about it, but AI is a real game changer, and it's going to be a real game changer for the security community as well. So I think that's going to impact us dramatically going forward. Hence why you should probably get into it. Don't be part of the problem, be a part of the solution. So, next question. In my opinion, what are the most effective strategies for managing and mitigating risk in an organization's information security program? Ooh, that's an expansive question. I don't think there's any one particular strategy you need to follow. There's a number of them, and I have my preferences, and I'm sure you'll develop your own preferences as well. Probably the most effective strategy you can have for managing and maintaining risk is actually doing it. Actually choosing your framework you're going to use and processing your risks through that framework and that model. Why? Because very few organizations really do it. In my experience, a lot of organizations don't understand the risks that they have at all. Their information security program is merely there to tick a box. They don't correctly assign the risk to owners. Owners don't accept that they've had a risk assigned to them, and maybe you manage it really spottily over the course of a year. Maybe you only do it every couple of years. And risk mitigation, well, that's part and parcel of what we do. If we're not maintaining a good risk program, then how are we meant to know where to put our efforts, or what the organization wants us to put our efforts into? And being able to communicate that risk strategy to the powers that be, the people that matter, the ones who, you know, are tasked with keeping the organization running cost effectively and meaningfully. So the C-suite, you know, if you learn how to communicate with the C-suite, everything gets eminently better when you want stuff done. Because like they're human as well. If they trust you, then they'll get things done. If they don't trust you, they'll just sit there and go, yeah, whatever, and then let you move on your merry way. So best strategies, do it, communicate it, and regularly reassess it, which is the standard for any good information security program, if you read between the lines. And don't downgrade risks. This is the other thing. Don't ever allow somebody to talk you into downgrading a risk unless you agree that the countermeasures they put in place, or the activities that they've done to kind of reduce that risk have been carefully done. Okay. How have advancements in technology, such as cloud computing, mobile devices, the Internet of Things, affected the security landscape? What challenges and opportunities have these advancements presented? As I kind of said a little bit earlier on, the advancements in technology is both a blessing and a curse. You know, it's both the advancements in technology are a blessing and a curse. Mainly because the changes and advancements in technology are happening quicker and quicker and quicker. We're getting less and less control as an organization over our own technology stack because it's being run by third parties, who in turn have their own third parties and so on and so forth. Mobile devices have made things a little bit more difficult when it comes to maintaining a secure perimeter. But now we're working in a world where a lot of people are predominantly working from home now. So that mobile device requirement has gone from being a nice to have requirement, or a requirement that's only sort of associated with a small group of people or groups of people for short periods of time, and now a real kind of ongoing persistent threat. You know, people are using unsecured hotspots, wireless, that kind of technology to connect now to their organizations. So yeah, you know, mobile devices have been a key game changer. And the Internet of Things, where do I begin with that? Everything has now become connected to the internet, whether you like that or whether you dislike that. We're seeing a lot of our technological sort of stack going in the hole. You can automate it and you can manage it from wherever you are in the world. I really don't like the Internet of Things, I'll be honest. I like some of the idea behind the application, you know, the ability to turn your heating on your way home from work, which, you know, reduces bills, because if you're kind of living on your own or something and you're heading back from, let's just say, New York to your home and you've got a 3-hour journey, you can turn your heating on, you know, an hour before you get home, just so it's nice and toasty when you get in, as opposed to turning it on when you walk through the door and shivering for half an hour whilst the heating kicks in. Fridges. Do fridges need to attach to the internet? I suppose. I want to order things through my fridge. No, I'd actually prefer to get my tablet or my laptop out and sit down and buy it through that. I'm sorry. I just see the Internet of Things as a bit of a buzzword and a bit of a sort of marketing, a selling point, really. Oh, you know, you can connect your toaster to the internet. Oh, fantastic. I've connected my toaster to the bleeding internet. What's that going to mean? Oh, you can make some toast on your way home. Well, it takes me like 4 minutes to do it when I walk through the door. And by the time I get home, if it's popped before then, it's going to be cold, unless you like cold toast, I suppose. I just think it's become a bit of a challenge in itself, really, in many respects. And because we're starting to get to the point now where devices are being, or hardware, kitchenware, that kind of thing, are coming as standard to be able to connect to the internet or connected to the internet. I don't see why. I don't see what's the point. You know, fair enough, have a digital display on your fridge saying, you know, these are the temperatures, that kind of thing, you know, but does it need to be connected to the internet? Not really, I suppose. But then, I mean, you know, you've got to look at it objectively. If you're a refrigeration company who are storing large quantities of frozen produce that spoils if your refrigeration units go off, then yeah, it's great to be able to look at where your temperatures are, so you know that if something goes wrong, you can get your people rushing around, getting it fixed as quickly as possible before things spoil. So there is an application for it, but I don't think in the day-to-day running, you know, of stuff. I mean, I like the little tile tablet, you know, tags. They're really good if you've got kids, for instance, and you want to make sure they're all safe on the way to school and so on and so forth. Slipping that in their bag or their pocket, usually a pocket's best bet. Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. But then that kind of technology could be abused as well. You know, I think we've gone through a period of real serious innovation in the general world today, but none of us have considered. None of us. I have. You probably have if you're an Infosec person. But a lot of people don't consider the security behind things until it's an established technology. They kind of did with cloud. You know, cloud came in, everybody adopted it. It was like, yeah, look how cheap it is. It's all fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Then the first few of them got taken out and it all went to pot. Cryptocurrency exchanges, another really good example of that. Mt. Gox. You know, 1 minute they were flying pretty and everybody was happy. They're like, yeah, use our services. They're all nice and safe, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic. And then one day, boom, everything's gone. That's the challenge. The opportunities, well, security is something that's sorely needed in any situation for any organization or any individual. Those opportunities will change like the wind on a regular basis. You've just got to be able to spot that change coming down the line. And in some cases, this goes back to the first part of this particular masterclass, being able to predict and spot. And in many respects, it is a bit, you are gambling a bit, just as the same as, oh God, now I'm going to show my age. Back in the day, whether you chose a VHS cassette player or a Betamax cassette player, technically Betamax was the better technology, but it wasn't winning in the adoption fight. It was VHS. Same with CDs and mini Discman and things like that. There's all kinds of technologies that have come out that have seemed like a really good idea, but have wound up kind of dead down the line very quickly as another particular format dominates. But each of these requires security. The new app that's being developed, you know, what are the opportunities there? Well, you could develop better code, become a programmer, become a security coder, where you code secure products. You can make yourself an absolute fortune. There's a good opportunity right there. You know, we've got a lot of tools out there at the moment. Not all of them are particularly good, but everybody's trying to jump on the bandwagon to earn as much out of this space as possible. So there are opportunities, but you've got to be wily, you've got to spot them. Okay. As an information security professional, how do you approach balancing security requirements with user experience and usability? What techniques or practices do you employ to ensure security measures don't overly hinder productivity or user satisfaction? That is an excellent question, and one of the hardest things an Infosec person has to do to get this right, or to get their job role right and accepted. Put too much security into an environment, and users as we term them, users, customers, the workforce, are going to find the user experience horrendous and particularly unusable. And that's just the way it is. The more security you put on, the more onerous security you put on, the worse things can get. And very quickly it will bite you on the butt, because you need your users, your customers, whatever, to undertake basic security principles in order to secure your environment. Pile on the requirements and what they need to do, and they'll buckle and they break. It's not their discipline. Security isn't their discipline. Teach them how to spot things, yes. They're not going to be interested in how to prevent them or how to deal with an incident related to them as a general rule. So one of the key aspects of learning how to balance your security requirements within the organization, again, going back to one of my first ever pieces of advice, is get to know the culture of the business that you're securing. What nuances as an organization do they have? What culture are they from? Which part of the world are they from? How you handle security in places within China is going to be very different about how about how you're applying security to somebody in, I don't know, Canada. The principles will still be the same, but the culture will be rapidly different. One firm, the culture will be, look, this is just how we do things. We don't like complications. Another firm will be, well, no, we want to secure everything all of the time. Don't go to either extreme. What you need to do is figure out that culture, figure out what you can do, figure out your quick wins, your midterm allies within the organization that you convince around that security is quite an important part of general life and business life. And learn how to communicate. So many people don't know how to do that. And it scares me how people don't know how to talk to one another or pose one another questions. It's a weird phenomenon, and then people get irate about it. Keeping cool, calm, and collected, looking objectively at your organization's culture, its key business assets, its place in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the business world and the sector that it's in, and then just put in practical security countermeasures for your defense in depth, and hit the difficult items that you need to do. Get them done first. PCI DSS, if you've got a database stuffed full of cardholder data and you're going through PCI for the first time, get it out of there. You could do requirement 3, but a lot of people find requirement 3 particularly challenging. For those of you who don't know what requirement 3 and PCI DSS is it's the handling of the stored cardholder data. What are the most important lessons you've learned from your experience in responding to security incident or breaches, and how have they influenced your incident response strategy? Okay, there are a couple of things that we've spoken about in this set of masterclasses that are really important to understand, to do, to develop, and to learn. Risk management being a very, very key one of those. How to communicate, and policies and procedures are another good example of a critical aspect of what we do. And then we come to incident response. Now, of every part of Infosec that I would strictly recommend that you really work hard at developing, it's your incident response capability, okay? Incidents are going to happen. They may happen by accident. They may happen on purpose. They may be small incidents. They may be huge, far-reaching incidents. You are going to experience it in every organization. Learning how to switch off from the situation, learning how to objectively say, right, everyone's running around with their hands waving above their heads, much like one of those American car, blower men who kind of just wave around. That's what you tend to see when incidents occur. You see a lot of people kind of doing that and running around and getting all scared and worried and concerned and making knee-jerk response reactions to things. You need to not do that. Do the opposite. Cool, calm, collected. And to quote one of my favorite books of all time, don't panic. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not read it, look it up. It's very good. Don't panic. Just stop with the panicking. Sit down and look objectively at the facts. What has happened? When did it happen? How did it happen, if we know? What do we suspect has happened? Who's implicated? And what assets are affected? That's all you need to know initially. Don't let people do Chinese whispers. Don't go through like 4 layers of people talking to one another before it gets to you. Go to the root. What has happened? When and how and what and why? Do your basics, learn your basics. Once you've got all the information, then you can objectively look at how to respond to it. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be sometimes when you're responding to an incident, you're looking at incidents of, and you're running through the process and you're going to discover new things cropping up. I have had some incidents that I've dealt with over kind of like an 8 or 9 month period of time to investigate what's going on. Different incidents mean different ways that you need to respond. So when you're investigating an individual who has been committing fraud or has been doing some kind of data theft internally, it may take you longer to investigate and to gather all the relevant proof than a zero-day vulnerability kicking off out in the big wide world and you finding out, you're vulnerable to that zero-day vulnerability. Very different techniques used to handle those. And then you have the old fun one, which is this something that's going to go to court or is this not? If you're running an incident response process on an incident that has occurred and the organization wants to feasibly take someone to court, then you have to understand how to gather information, how to gather evidence, a clear chain of evidence controls, knowing how not to pollute, that evidence in a way that means it could be contested in court. That's a really key one. Preservation of evidence as well. Incident response is probably one of the more interesting parts of what we do. And to be honest with it, you never stop learning. And one of the key aspects of incident response is your ability to do wargaming, which is brilliant. Wargaming is a fantastic concept whereby you run through a real incident, an incident that maybe has happened to you in the past or a competitor or whatever, or one that you can envision occurring. And how would you deal with it? How would you handle it? How would you respond to it? It helps you build your team. Your incident response team gets closer together and the better they work together and train together. Hence why wargaming is one of my favorite pieces of ongoing security activities to do, because not only does it facilitate the testing of your incident response plan so you can refine it, but it also gives you some playbooks in the event that something potentially like that does happen in the future. And it provides awareness to the people running through that incident response training on what they need to do to respond to an incident, which first and foremost, hopefully you're saying alongside me, do not panic. It really annoys me when I see people do that. So yeah, incident response key thing to learn, something that you will be learning throughout your entire life, your entire career, and there are definitely right ways and wrong ways to do it. But yeah, my personal journey with incident response, you know, that changed rather dramatically throughout the course of my career because the changes in the way that we consume technology. You know, way back when it was a simple investigate and try to resolve, and in the investigation you might be sifting through thousands of logs. Well, nowadays with technology you don't need to do that. You've got a good scene technology, you know, it'll be able to crunch those numbers for you really quickly. That's a significant change, and it's made my job as an incident response manager or person as part of the team a hell of a lot easier. I can sift data a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot more efficiently and effectively, get to the root cause of the problem. Because with incident response, you do want to get to the root cause of the problem as quickly as possible, but not compromising any of the steps along the way, because you can get yourself into a bit of a pickle doing that, and you can cause yourself more harm than good in many respects. So yeah, really good question that. Can you share any notable experiences or lessons learned from collaborating with other teams, such as IT development, executive leadership, to implement effective security measures across an organization? What key factors contribute to a successful cross-functional collaboration? Understanding the thing that you're there to secure. Number one. That was the first lesson I learned when I first got into Infosec. Communication and understanding that IT don't view the assets or the business in the same way that the finance department does, or the legal department does, or the journalistic department. Every time I interact with another team within an organization, I've worked with a lot of them. I've developed strategies to deal with it and to deal with them. IT, for instance, IT are problem-solving people. You know, that's what they do. They love a challenge. They love a problem. So when you're engaging with them, rather than telling them they've got to do something, a good way of dealing with getting what you need out of them is to challenge them and engage with them. I don't mean challenge them and challenge their knowledge. Just say, if you could do this, what would you recommend, and how would you build it from a network perspective? Feed them a bit of coffee and a couple of donuts, and boom, they'll be at that whiteboard fighting over the pens, trying to figure out a way to build it for you, and they'll do a really good job of it as well. But with IT, it's like, you know, people in IT tend to be like a pack of wolves. If you show weakness and you don't know what you're doing, they're never going to respect you, and you're going to get torn apart. So, you know, come in, look at the IT department, figure out how they function, and make friends with them. And the other reason why I say make friends with them as an InfoSec professional, because you are going to be doing a lot of cyber security going through your career. And if you, yeah, you're going to come a bit of a cropper if you can't figure out how to deal with your own IT department. Psychology is the key. And that's probably one of the notable lessons I learned very early on. Learn how to speak to people. I come from an IT background. They can be very blunt as a group. Now they're a lot more respected, a bit like security, than they were back in the 90s. A lot of people looked at IT people back then as though they were witchcraft, you know, witches and warlocks, casting eldritch magics over the technology to make it work and make it work well. And it doesn't work that way. Same in security, it doesn't work. Just because somebody says, "Oh, it's secure," doesn't mean it is. Schrodinger's cat, you know. Consistency is good. If you put a set of rules on an IT team, then you have to be prepared to set a similar set of rules to finance, sales, a third party, whatever it may well be. But be consistent in the delivery and the application of your information security as you collaborate. And try to work together. Everybody's got the same idea. well, maybe not the same idea, but they've got the same ideal. You know, they want to do a good job. They want to feed their kids, go home and chill out and all the rest of it. They don't want aggravation. They don't want pain, and don't over fatigue departments with security is the other key aspect here. And a good lesson learned, you know, so let's use the IT department as an example. You want something done, feed them a donut, give them a coffee, pose them a challenge, they'll build it, get in the other teams as needed, and people will be happy. Management will be happy. They've got what they need. You'll be happy because hopefully you managed to build in some security and make it all work. Okay, so final statements. Remember, I've only covered the broad strokes and an overview. Look out for other really good sources of information. Paul C. Dwyer, Jane Franklin, John Kerr. Keep an eye out for good individuals as well. And feel free to, quite often, if you ask them if they can help you out, quite often if you message them, they'll help you out if you need help. So look after yourselves, everybody. Have a great time, and we'll speak to you soon.